Next witnesses.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senator Hancock, my name is David Smith. I'm a partner with Stice and Block, counsel to one of the developers at the Oakland Army Base, California Capital and Investment Group. First, I'd just like to state clearly there is no proposal for a coal terminal in Oakland. What was applied for and for which Oakland granted vested entitlements in 2012 is a full-service bulk commodity facility, which is exactly what the market for shippers demands. Two quick things to dispel before I move on. One, in fact, the city was given a full presentation of how these facilities operate and the full panoply of commodities that they go through. Among other things, a potential operator of the facility, Kinder Morgan, made a presentation which had full inclusion of their other facilities and all the commodities that are shipped through it, which include the discussion today and the full variety of others. And I'd like to point out with respect, which you did not hear from the supporter panel, was consideration of their concerns through the prism of the litany of mandatory mitigation measures and conditions of approval that have already been imposed on this project. We're very early on in the process. Horizontal infrastructure is just now going on, and there has been no commitment to specifically ship or exclude coal or any other commodity through this facility at this point in time. What we're talking about is the Oakland Global Trade and Logistics Center. What used to be the former Oakland Army Base, 430 acres right on the waterfront in Oakland, and which sat fallow for a decade. It was entitled and invested by the city in 2012. What it meant to do was capitalize on the Army Base's strategic location, immediate proximity both to the Deepwater Port in Oakland and immediate proximity to active rail. And the importance of that was the ability to move the commodities directly from the rail, directly to the ships, eliminating what? Truck trips. It was particularly the difficult circumstances in West Oakland and otherwise caused by antiquated diesel equipment, diesel emissions that got everybody so excited about the potential at Oakland Global. Project estimates it will result in 112,000 fewer truck trips annually than would otherwise happen at a facility like this because of that ability to integrate the port and the rail operations. Further, the facility committed to be state-of-the-art in both technology and operations. All operations at Oakland Global, regardless of commodity being shipped, will be in full compliance with all federal, state, regional, local laws and regulations. And beyond that, we're in an option agreement with an entity called TLS to become the potential operator of the terminal. In their testimony before the city of Oakland, they've, provided expert testimony as to why coal can and is shipped safely today. But even above and beyond that, they have committed to cover all the facilities and cover the rail cars to further assuage the concerns. As was noted, the project underwent full CEQA review in 2012 and specifically included a bulk commodity terminal in the facilities. And where are we today? In just the construction phase, the facility has already employed over 2,000 individuals, over half the hours of which are with local hires. When finished, the facility will have 2,000 permanent jobs. Already, tens of millions of dollars of infrastructure work has already been done in reliance on the vested entitlements for the project. We are not here today to argue to or for against any particular commodity. In fact, as I said, there's been no commitment to ship anything at this point. The export terminal, which is the focus of 1277, is just one part of the overall Oakland Global project on the Army base, but it is core to the overall viability of the project. Contracts for the shipment of bulk commodities require decades-long commitments, construction of infrastructure, railway, and tens of millions of dollars. Accordingly, the market demands an upfront commitment to the ability to ship whatever legal commodity the market demands at that time. That is why in 2012, we requested and the city entitled a full-service facility. Not only that, we spent the time, money, and man resources to vest those entitlements through a development agreement. For us, you're hearing new information, new things. For us, nothing has changed. We are pursuing and constructing exactly what we asked the city for in 2012. We have honored all of our obligations to the city to make Oakland Global a reality. But once the facility's capacity and vested entitlements are curtailed on political grounds, it imposes a potentially fatal cloud of uncertainty on the project's viability. Today, the debate is about coal. What will it be tomorrow? In fact, Mr. Mohammed in his testimony called out coal and other unclean commodities. How big is the list? Why would a shipper commit to a decades-long contract and tens of millions of dollars with that level of uncertainty facing it? I'll conclude my testimony there. I'm happy to answer any questions about the project or anything the committee may have.
Thank you.
Sandy George, representing the American Planning Association. Like BIA, we have not concerned with a specific project, but as CEQA practitioners, we're very, very concerned about a separate special CEQA requirement for a very specific project, and that precedent is of concern to us. So that is our major concern.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other speakers? I don't see any. So I'll ask Senator Hancock if she would like to make any comments responding and ask if there's any questions from our committee. We have a couple, so go ahead, please.
Why don't I try to cover some of them? I was trying to get them all written down during this, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
Again, it is not the project. No one who is in favor of these bills wants to end the redevelopment of the city land adjacent to the Port of Oakland. The problem is with the product that was introduced after the last EIR was constructed, a product which is known to have environmental impacts, coal. And not just a little coal here or there. The largest coal export facility on the Pacific coast. And what that has generally meant is literally mile-long cars of cars uncovered as of now because, as we indicated, you can talk about covered coal cars, they don't exist and they aren't in use yet. And there was a study done in the state of Oregon, which has voted just in the last couple of weeks to end its association with coal in that state. But they did a study showing that because of the combustibility of coal when it is confined, there could be real problems of explosions and fires were anyone to undertake the large-scale use of covered coal cars. So that may be somewhere in the future, but it isn't in the next short term for this particular project. And I am a little at a loss about the statement that there's no commitment on coal. There certainly wasn't a commitment on coal. A few years ago, the company's newsletter said, and I quote, "It has come to my attention that there are community concerns about a purported plan to develop a coal plant or coal distribution facility as part of the Oakland Global Project. This is simply untrue. The individuals spreading this information are misinformed. CCIG is publicly on record as having no interest or involvement in the pursuit of coal-related operations at the former Oakland Army base." Now, the developer has also said, well, that he has now taken his vested rights, whatever these may be, and given them to yet another company, which is composed of former employees of the Port of Oakland. All these people are very well known to each other, by the way. It's an interesting question to me, how long you can keep a chain of sending your vested rights on to somebody else and then claim that you've made no commitments. But in fact, Mark McClure, who I believe is a partner of Mr. Tagami and CCIG, was present at the pitch that was made to the state of Utah to give $53 million to the developers so that they could develop rail lines and a coal depot so that they would have, so that they could export their coal. And I would point out that the Port of Oakland turned down a contract with this very same Bowie Resources mining company just the year before. So this is kind of, I think there is definitely a plan to move ahead. Let's put it this way, the state of Utah has said that it will contribute $53 million, and as a result, expects to be able to export large quantities of its coal. 1277 simply says, before a change of this magnitude occurs, which is a substantial change in the circumstances under which the project is being undertaken, one of the CEQA requirements for a supplemental EIR, or new information which was not known and could not have been known at the time the EIR was certified, becomes available. The $53 million from the state of Utah, specifically for coal, solicited by the developers, seems to me to be a substantial change in the project, and that it is very important for the health of the East Bay, the health of the city of Oakland, that that we indicate that should this move forward as it appears to be doing, and there is a permit required from some other public agency, that agency will do a supplemental EIR looking at the impact of coal.
Okay, thank you. We have some questions from a couple of senators. Senator Roth, please, and then Senator Cannell, and then Senator Gaines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I'm not a big fan of the CEQA process itself in terms of the timeliness and some other things. I like clean air, and I appreciate the benefits that that CEQA and other environmental statutes have provided to some of us, particularly some of us in inland Southern California, where our air used to be a lot worse than it is today. But having said that, can someone really explain to me how we got to this point with that particular EIR? I mean, if you have an EIR that's analyzing a project and it's a bulk storage facility, how can it not address the types of bulk cargo that move through ports, such as coal? I'm not was never an environmental attorney, and as you know, I'm not particularly knowledgeable about CEQA, but can someone here answer that? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. In a bulk commodity terminal, the spectrum of commodities that could come through exceed 15,000 potential commodities that could pass through it. What the city analyzed and what it appropriately analyzed was the ability of a facility like this to adopt and implement the well-known specific measures relative to whatever commodity may be coming through. There are chapters in the Code of Federal Regulations in Volume 47 that specifically reference the way commodities designated as hazardous by the EPA must be handled.
But this is California.
Yes, sir, but that's one starting place. And coal, by the way, is not designated a hazardous material by the EPA, just to note. But there are handbooks by the railways, there are state regulations, there are the CEQA mitigation measures that we have. The question answered in CEQA before the city was, is this facility capable of addressing the safety concerns regardless of which commodity will come through? And that was what was looked at and answered yes.
The safety concerns, but CEQA, the EIR is supposed to address the environmental concerns.
Correct, the impacts on the environment and the ability to safely move and transport those.
So is this situation that Oakland now faces something that the local officials could direct a supplemental EIR?
It's an excellent question, Senator, and the rules for follow-up CEQA review are well known in statute and guidelines and in the case law. And 1277 does not purport to change any of those rules. It is a very fact-specific inquiry, which is vested in the local agency responsible for the project. So frankly, I'm at a loss why it would be appropriate for the legislature to usurp that role from the city of Oakland, particularly if it is so clear and obvious to the supporters of the bill that it's an unmistakable conclusion. Why would they be stepping in front of the city of Oakland on that determination of established law?
Well, I'm not sure that answered my question. Can the local officials, under the circumstances that have been outlined here in this bill and in the presentation, direct a supplemental EIR based on the fact that it is now known that coal will be moving through this bulk storage facility?
So, Senator, if I might, based on the testimony that I heard today about the facts, and again, this is on behalf of CBIA, which just cares about the CEQA process, not about the specifics. CEQA comes with a recognition that there will be new information. It also comes with a recognition that you will do a comprehensive EIR up front, and then you have a range of regulatory agencies that are going to regulate, including that are going to regulate the operation of it and who have to issue their own permits. So I'm not familiar with this project, but I would imagine that they would need permits from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. They may need water board permits to govern the effluent around their stormwater. So when those agencies go through and go to process their permits, if there is new information that wasn't adequately looked at previously, then CEQA, as it already stands in statute and guideline and case law, would already require them to go through and do that review.
But, and again, this may demonstrate my complete lack of knowledge about CEQA and the process. But in this case, given the fact that we now know, or someone knows, that coal will be moving through this bulk storage facility, can the local electeds direct or whoever the appropriate authority is, direct a supplemental EIR to address the environmental impacts of the coal transport and perhaps require additional mitigation as part of the approval process?
Yeah, and what I'm suggesting is not only could that be the case, but in fact, CEQA would anticipate and require it before an air district, for example, went and issued a permit. They can't just do it without looking at what the environmental impacts that the proponent suggested might occur. They would have to, under existing CEQA case law, and in fact, indeed the Clean Air Act, look at all of those impacts before they could go ahead and issue an air quality permit, for example, to the facility to operate.
But that's different than the local governing body that is dealing with the EIR imposing mitigation requirements. That's the air district working with the air district's regulations, or the water control board working with the water control board regulations. That's after the fact. I'm asking if they have the authority to direct what we're being asked to direct here, which is a supplemental EIR, right?
I think maybe we should ask the attorneys for the developer.
Well, I won't dominate the conversation. Those are
No,
my.
you can dominate the conversation. It's a very good question.
I've got a chair here.
One of the problems is that there have been,
It is precisely the city that should answer that question.
no, can you answer that question? Do they have the right to open a supplemental EIR right now, next week if they want to, now that we know about coal?
This existing CEQA statute, guidelines, and case law give the exact test under which supplemental review is required. And it's, again, I'm not sure why we're having the legislature answer that question as opposed to the city.
Senator, if you're a city council member and you approve a project, a development project with 400 units, and there's an EIR done on that project for 400 units, and it studies the traffic and all the environmental impacts, and then the developer changes their mind and wants to build 1,000 units, and the traffic impacts are bigger, a larger magnitude, the developer has to go back and have a process to review the EIR and determine whether or not an addendum or a supplement or even a new EIR is needed. There's a process for that. Okay, so if they change the project from what the original EIR was done, and the project was changed fundamentally, then there has to be a process to review a new EIR. And the question for us here is, we have a bill that's asking for a supplemental EIR. We had an EIR done the first one was done in
I think it was 2001, I'm not sure.
2002.
2002.
And then there was a supplement done 4 years ago, right? The one done 4 years ago,
Did not look at coal. None of the mitigation measures addressed coal.
the one done 4 years ago was based on a project, okay, a project that they had. And the question I would have is, well, do we really have a new project? We have a new project that the EIR, the original EIR, and then the supplemental EIR didn't really cover. And what is the state's interest? The state is investing out of state general obligation bonds.
$178 million worth of state 1B bond money, which you have to say the California Transportation Commission had no idea the coal was part of the project when they did that.
That's it's close to 10% of all the freight goods movement funds that they had in that bond. You know, it's a lot of money. So we have an interest. I mean, obviously, when we approve things for a project, we want to know what kind of project it is. You know, and so like when there's an EIR issue, I think we are, what do they call the state? We're not the lead agency, but we're a responsible agency. So we have to bear some responsibility for the environmental impact review. So we have that responsibility. So under the law, we have to kind of be responsible for our $178 million that we're spending of the taxpayers' funds, general obligation bonds. So the question I have is, if we're a responsible agency, what impediment do we have to doing an EIR? If we're a responsible agency, if we ask in this law that we do an EIR, a second supplement to, that's what you're asking basically in the bill.
Right.
A second supplement to study the environmental impact of the specific new project that's changed from the old project. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Well,
I think it's kind of a,
thank you, Senator Bell.
I used to work on all this stuff too. I was, that's, something I'm familiar with at some point, but Senator Cannella has worked on this also as a,
Yes, maybe a different,
we're both have,
I don't know if you're calling on me, but the
yeah, you're the next one, and then
different slant maybe.
Senator Gaines too.
I think Chairman Bell's question is appropriate. If you are going to design a subdivision and there's 400 lots identified and you go and do the CEQA work, and then the developer wants to change it to 1,000, you have to do a new EIR. You can't just change it. So if the premise is this was not identified and it meets such a standard that the legislature needs to intervene and do another EIR, I think the courts would probably intervene as well. I just don't understand why you don't just sue the project. I mean, CEQA, I think what's going to happen if we do a supplemental EIR, and I don't know the project, I don't like coal, but just speaking on a larger scale, it'll kill the project. It'll get litigated forever, and nothing will ever move forward with this project. So if there's a problem, go to court, sue it. We do it all the time with CEQA. I mean, it's probably the most litigated thing in the whole state of California. So it just seems inappropriate for us to intervene at this point when there's so many other remedies. And if we do it now, what next? Are we going to jump into every project that we don't like when they've gone through the process? And what signals does that send to other folks that may want to do business in California? If you're on our side now, we will help you. And in the future, if you get on our bad side, we're going to change the law and we're going to make you do more CEQA. So I certainly understand what the goal is, and I don't live in Oakland. I respect the senator that does, and she knows what's best for her district. But I just think there's so many other remedies to deal with this that this is probably not the appropriate one.
Senator Gaines.
Yeah, I think my line of thinking is similar. I do not understand as a result of new information through the CEQA process, why there couldn't be a supplemental EIR. And I have concern about it coming to the state legislature and creating new precedents, which is, CEQA is already problematic in the state of California, and we've got a housing crisis here that has increased the cost of housing as a result of limiting supply and increasing cost. And if we set a new precedent, I am very concerned that we'll just drive costs up. So I'd rather not do that. I'd like to see the process handled locally. New information has been provided. There ought to be a pathway for a supplemental EIR, and you can address the issue locally.
What's the status of that on a local level,
Okay.
Senator? Maybe clarify that
Yeah,
issue.
there's a couple of things. First, I just have to say that this legislature has intervened in CEQA law from time to time, mainly when somebody wanted a stadium. And we have, in fact, yes, we have done that. But that is, beside the fact. What I want to say is, here's where the state interest comes in. This state has spent the last decade trying to position itself as an environmental leader and model for a planet that is struggling to build a green energy economy and move off coal and fossil fuels. Now, I believe it was 2006 that we had a bill in this legislature signed by the then governor to divest California power plants from coal. And we are doing that, and we've almost completed it. 2 years ago, this legislature passed a resolution calling on the U.S. Congress to divest from coal and to watch out for the health of communities along the Pacific coast and a number of other things. Assemblymember Das Williams authored that. And then last year, this legislature passed and the governor signed SB 185 by Senator De Leon, which divests California's public pension funds from coal. Now, clearly, we have recognized as a state that we want to go in another direction. And in fact, we've been joined by so many other states that coal is pretty much a dying industry. And it is very interesting to look at what's going on with this particular transaction, where a particular coal company, Bowie Resources, is buying up bankrupted coal mines across the West. And their key is that they're going to ship that coal to West Oakland by the San Francisco Bay and send it to China and other developing countries that are already facing civil unrest because of the high levels of air pollution in those countries. So I think we do have a state interest. One of the issues in Oakland, which is why I was so interested in finding out what the attorney for the developer thinks, is the whole issue. It's sort of contract law. It's not CEQA law anymore, environmental law. It has to do with, could the city give all its vested rights so it has nothing whatever to say about what's going to go on that piece of land that it owns? I believe that they've been told, or at least they seem to believe, that they have got a problem and that they have, they're looking for what they can do, because the city of Oakland, too, in 2012, passed a resolution saying they didn't want coal shipped through the town of Oakland. So, the developer says he has all vested rights, he can do whatever he wants. And I thought he said he was going to sue him if they tried to stop him, but maybe he hasn't said that after all. And now that he has given his vested rights to somebody else. So who do we hold accountable? What do we do? To us, working with Ledge Council, with the committee staff, it seemed that making very clear that The bottom line is that it is now known that this project will ship coal and handle coal, and the potential adverse environmental impacts were never considered in any EIR. And 1277 simply states that a supplemental EIR should be done, and by whatever agency has to issue the next set of permits.